Hi guys and welcome to Rathwulven Bushcraft. Today's video is sponsored by prepshop.nl and we're going to talk about this little fella here. The Buck BANTAM BLW 285 folding knife. And this is just a budget pocket knife. Jeroen, the owner of prepshop.nl, sent this to me and asked me, hey, can you just do a review on this knife and just do a couple of tests and tell me what you think of that knife. So I said yes, because I never owned a buck knife before in my life. And it was a great opportunity to get to know such a type of knife. And besides that, I'm not paid or so what I'm going to tell you is my personal impression after about 4 weeks of using this knife as an EDC blade. And I will just talk about my experiences where I found this knife to be useful when I thought that the knife was reaching its limitations. And yeah, we're going to have a look at a couple of things. First of all, I would like to talk about the specifications, and later on we'll also do some practical tests from the EDC field as well as in regards to bushcraft, so you can get an impression what this knife is all about and what it can do. So if you want to, please join me in this video and let's get started. So for the specifications of the knife. The knife has a blade length of 7.9 centimeters and a handle of 11.1 centimeters. This adds up to a total of 19 centimeters. The weight of the knife is just 68.3 grams, so it's a pretty lightweight knife. The spine is 3 millimeters thick, so you can compare this to a Mora Companion heavy duty. The handle as such is made from an injection molded plastic. So it's basically a thermoplastic handle, and I have to say that I was really surprised about the grip and the handling of that knife, because I didn't expect a lot of that plastic handle here. And I have to say that if we talk about ergonomics and how it fits the hand, it's just really nice for as long as you're a right-handed person. You might have a disadvantage here if you're left-handed, because on the other side you have that clip, this belt clip that is basically pinned there with those torch screws. And this might be a disadvantage for you if you're a left-handed person, so please keep that in mind. What's pretty nice about the handle though is this hole here. It's basically made for paracord or whatever kind of lanyard you want to put through there, so I very much like that. If we then take a look at the blade basically has this double thumb stud right here, as you can see. So you can open it with 2 hands or just with 1 hand, like so. What becomes apparent is that right here in between the plastic of the handle and the actual blade, there's a tiny space. So I don't know if you can see this properly on the camera, but it does have a little play. And I have to say that this is the biggest disadvantage of that knife in my opinion. If buck knives are watching, guys, maybe you can do something about this, because as far as intermediate and heavy duty work is concerned, this might become an issue. It does not harm at all if we're just doing regular type of cutting work or so, and it's also not that big of a deal for that price. But it became apparent right when I put it out of its original packaging, and I have to say that when it comes to that plane here, that's just a weak spot in my opinion. Then nevertheless, about the material of the blade, that's a pretty good material, because we're talking about 420 HC stainless steel, and that hits a 55 to 58 on the Rockwell scale, and is a pretty decent steel. The only thing you just need to understand is that there is a difference between the hardness of a steel and the toughness of a steel. And sometimes this steel is sold as a hard steel, and it's not. It's a pretty soft steel, but it's tough. And just to explain the difference to you, the hardness is mainly referring to any type of deformation, so bending basically. If I would take that blade and I would just apply enough force, it would bend eventually because the material is soft. But if we talk about the toughness, we're talking about the brittleness of the material as such, so the ability to break, so to speak. And if we're talking about toughness, this knife actually scores position number 3 on the top 25 steels that I used for budget pocket knives. So that's pretty amazing. If we then talk about the corrosion, knife is also perfectly fine because the stainless steel is very resistant to corrosion. I was using the knife for about 4 weeks now in any given situation. Carried it as an everyday carry knife, and up here in the north we do have a pretty relentless weather. By that I mean that we have a lot of rain at the moment, there's a lot of salty air coming in from the coastline, and so far no problems in regards to corrosion with the knife, so really great job from Buck Knives there. If we talk about the edge retention then, which basically means keeping your knife sharp. As far as it's a soft steel, the edge retention is not particularly great, but hey, what should you expect from a soft steel, huh? Not that much, right? Then, just to basically have a look at the back here, we do have a backlock system here. And if you take a close look, we got the button right here in the middle, and I really love that design, because if you just take a look, if I hold the knife naturally like so, I can press it here and close it. The traditional foldable knives that I know have the button right here in the back, and that becomes an issue. So I really like the design. Overall, it's just a well-designed knife, and for that low of a price, it really does a great job. It also gives a great impression. Maybe I should also point out that right here and right on the back, we do have these kind of grooves or kind of serrations, and they're just for better grip, because let's say for example that I'm doing some woodwork and I have to push with my thumb like this, or I'm holding it in the reverse grip just like so, I get a little bit of extra grip, and that's just a nice idea. So just from the visual aspect and from the material, I can say that this is a pretty good knife for that price. There are minor flaws, but hey, what do you expect from a budget knife? It remains a budget knife. And yeah, just to show you how it works in practice, I will just do a couple of demonstrations now and also explain a little bit of what my experiences were throughout the last 4 weeks with that knife. So for the first part of the practical review, I want to have a look at everyday tasks. And the reason being that an EDC knife such as that is nothing but that. What does that mean, EDC? Well, we all know that it stands for everyday carry, but the respective situation of the user of the knife might be completely different to mine or to yours. For example, in my case, I need a knife that performs well in any type of task that is related to woodworking, as far as I'm predominantly bushcrafting. But if you're working in, let's say for example, a factory, and you would have to open a lot of parcels throughout the day, this will be your EDC type of field. Then on the other hand, if you're a fisherman, for example, you might want to gut fish and use an EDC knife predominantly for that. Other people that might be climbing or might do some kind of military work or so might need to cut more rope than they need to cut other things. So yeah, what you get from that is basically an idea that EDC cannot be generalized. So I would like to look at things we all do in everyday life, and I got a couple of tasks that I was testing, which were cutting paper, cutting carton boxes, cutting vegetables and meat, opening bottles, cutting rope, cutting plastic. Also, I tried shaving with it. I tried to cut first aid bandages and plasters. Same thing accounts for cutting leather and also for punching holes in a belt. Also for sharpening a pencil. Also for opening cans. And I also used it for my smoking pipe, so for cleaning, and also for screwdriving and comparable tasks. So this is kind of like what I understand from EDC. This is what I think a knife like this needs to be able to do. And let's just start off. Let's have a look at the sharpness, okay? Let's say, for example, you get a parcel and you need to open this. Works just perfectly fine because that pointy end really works well into the material. Also with the carton box, see? Works just perfectly fine. I'm gonna zoom out a bit for you. See? Works just perfectly fine. what becomes apparent is that this pointy end, the drop point blade, is one of the best features of the knife in my opinion, because it's really good for any type of stabbing like purpose. So yeah, then if we take a look again also, as it would go with the reverse grip, the knife makes really nice lines. And I didn't mention this before, but the knife has a hollow grind. It's not a flat grind, so just you know. And it works incredibly well for all kind of lighter materials, so for paper and plastic and such. Just to give another demonstration, let's assume that we want to open a can or anything else that has some kind of aluminum or metal lid to it. As you can see, it penetrates rather well, and if you go in, you can do a lot of work here. See? That just works perfectly fine, but what became apparent is that, again, this weak spot right here gets noticed after a while, so it gets worse throughout time. Be really careful about this and use your knife properly, because also this is not really proper knife use. I'm just demonstrating this in case of whatever kind of real survival situation you might find yourself in, and you're lucky enough to have a can of beans, which is rather unlikely. But so just you see, it can do this. If we then take a look at cooking, we take our fish cooking cutting board here. Now we cut some onions. Works perfectly fine, it's super sharp, see? Also, if you can see this right here, I get very, very thin slices also, and that's kind of surprising if you have this thick spine right here, because in the beginning it feels a little weird compared to a kitchen knife, but it gets the job done. The same also if we would take a look at making any kind of food prepping work regarding meat. So if we're doing some kind of beef jerky or so, the knife just works perfectly well. The only problem you might encounter is if you're going to, you know, try to cut out a fillet. That doesn't work all too well, but hey, again, it's a pocket knife. It's not a special knife for your kitchen. That said, if we then look at other tasks, like for example opening a bottle of beer. Let's say you got a lovely señorita and you want to give her a tequieros. You just put it like this. Open. Works perfectly fine, and I have to say that after about 60 to 70 bottles throughout the last weeks, nothing happened to the blade as such. Like, there are no scratches. Let's get that in here. No scratches and no damage right here, and that's pretty nice. So you can use it for these purposes too. Then maybe for the rope, also pretty simple thing. See, just does perfectly well. See? So I can say that this knife just performs really, really well when we're talking about everyday tasks, just like everything that you would do in your everyday life and where you would need a blade. So if you're just looking for a pocket knife like this, then get this knife. I can really recommend it. But that's just for the EDC type of part. You're probably also curious about how this knife works in regards to woodworking, and then I'm talking whittling, carving, just the ability to bite into wood, to use a flint steel maybe if you're a bushcrafter, that might also be interesting, to carve notches, to do battening, and maybe to make a tri-stick. So if you want to, I'm going to take you down into the shed, and we're going to work a little bit on different pieces of wood just to see how fine that knife does. Welcome to the shed. So let's have a look at the knife and its performance in regards to woodworking. For bushcrafters, that's the most important task, of course, and also if you are into survival stuff or you do some kind of shit hits the fan type of scenarios, just understand that bushcraft is kind of like an essential part of survival, because if you would be in an emergency situation, you would need to process wood anyway. Doesn't matter if you're a hiker, if you're a prepper, if you're a survivalist, and whatever you would like to call yourself. But yeah, let's just have a look at the woodworking. As you can see here, I already made a tri-stick once with that knife, and this is a piece of hazel. I have another one right here, and let's just start off. Let's try to shave off that bark, and you will see what's gonna happen. See? Okay, let me stop here for a moment. As you can see, the knife has a pretty hard time to take off bigger chunks of bark, see? Like, it's always those tiny little spots. And the reason for that is that the knife, as I said before, has a hollow grind, and that geometry is just not designed to do the work that a Scandi grind or so would do usually. And in my opinion, for me personally, this is a disadvantage, because I really love Scandi grinds. And I really love knives that have a proper bite into the wood and also into the bark. Of course, you can get the job done. Get me right here, it's not that I'm saying that the knife is a bad knife because of that, but I just want to show this so you can see that already minor tasks like this become a little more complicated compared to, for example, a Mora knife or so. But okay, that aside, let's have a look at the tri-stick. Let me get the focus right here. As you can see, not all those grooves and notches are particularly nicely done, especially this one right here. And the reason for this is also the hollow grind. If you take a look, I'm pressing hard now, and that's kind of the bite that you would get. Let's get the focus on. There's not a lot of bite here, see? And this is mainly because the hollow grind right here, like the bevel, gets into the blade here, and you basically get a point of resistance. So for woodworking, this is a disadvantage, to be honest. But nevertheless, you can get stuff done. Because if you see here, for example, it does subtract material and you can work with it. It's not that the knife is completely useless. Let's just give it a new try right here. I'm applying a little pressure here. Now you can see right here, see how I bit into the wood. And then by that, I already have a notch right here. And if I just put some time and dedication in, it will just work fine. But the reason I want to mention this is a very simple one. The more force you have to put into your knife, the worse it's going to get for your safety, because let's assume that I have to press down like this and go really hard and just make sure that for this push cut, I have to push a lot. And don't let the knife do the work. I will lose control, because if it just flings off like that, see, it will become a problem. So bear that in mind. And then for another task, let's say I want to strip a bit of bark from a tree. The knife works pretty well for that, because you can hold it properly and firmly like so, or the other way around. Get it in there, and then just pull. See? And the drop point design comes in very handy. So I did strip a couple of trees with this, and I'm going to show you a picture right now. As you can see, it works perfectly fine, so I was really surprised about that. And yeah, nothing bad to say, it did the job. But then if we take a look at much more rough work, you know, like for example battening. Yeah, and I know what's going to happen now. Probably some of you sit at home and say like, oh, you can't batten with this knife, or you should not batten with this knife. Well, you're right, you should not. And let me show you why. Do you see this? And this is why foldable knives are not made for battening. Let me be absolutely clear, it's not that the knife fails at doing this task because it's a bad knife, it's just because battening is not the right task for these type of knives. And even worse, you could mess up this pin right here and basically break your knife. So please don't do that at home. I'm just showing you this as a means of illustrations in case you're a beginner and you don't have a lot of experience with knives and you think that you can take one of these knives outdoors and use it as a proper survival knife. So yeah, as you can see, 2 to 3 hits, I guess that was. Didn't go far, didn't split the wood, and it basically got loose just like that. And the reason why I want to show this is the following. I mean, look, this piece of wood is from a spruce, so that's incredibly soft wood. Try that with an oak, for example. You will have a bad time. And it's also pretty dangerous because, as you could see, if I'm battening like this and the knife folds in like so, see, it's already touching my finger, and if I just give it a smack and it bounces out of the irritation, it bounces out of the lock here, you can hurt yourself. And if you're doing it in a very forceful way, maybe even all across those fingers, and you don't want these types of injuries, okay? But yeah, if we leave battening aside, then of course we have to talk about fat wood scratches, for example. It does not work, and you know why? If you take a look right here, we don't have a 90-degree edge. And that's an issue because with those rounded edges here, you can't really do a lot of work there. And the same accounts for fire steel, for example. If you would take your fire steel and try to push off some sparks, it simply does not work. So if you want to, you can modify this, of course, and just take off a bit of material and just basically create this 90-degree edge. But in its kind of standard condition, the knife just doesn't do that job. So also here, in terms of bushcraft and survival, it would fail me if it was just fresh out of the box. But we should always end on a positive note, and I want to show you something that this knife does really, really well. If we're taking it like so, and we start doing this movement, for example, if we're trying to make ourselves like a bearing block for a bow drill, then I have to say that this knife just really does a great job, as you can see right here. If we just use the tip and we're doing this smooth and turning motion to get a cavity into here, so that we can use it, for example, yeah, for the bow drill or for other type of constructions. So that's something that's really good. And what I would also like to say is that, for example, if we're doing some spoons or so, and we're doing minor work in which we use our thumb, see, to get some shavings off, it also works perfectly fine. So it's not that the knife is completely useless. It is a pretty good knife, it's just that it's not made for heavy duty, as you can see. And I hope from those demonstrations it becomes clear that, yeah, a good knife always serves its respective purpose, and this knife's purpose is simply not heavy duty work. As simple as that. What else could we demonstrate? Well, we could try with feather sticks, for example. As you can see, the knife does it pretty well. Just so you can see here, there's not that big of a deal if you try to make a couple of shavings. But just bear in mind that it doesn't run as smoothly as a Scandi grind, of course. Yeah, well, I think this covered everything about this knife, at least from my perspective and for now. I have to say, just as a final word, that after 4 weeks of using that knife, I can say that it is a good knife for its price. And it features quite some quality for just 25 euros. Don't expect too much, because again, it's a budget knife. It's not meant to perform as well as a Puma, for example, or another handcrafted knife. But be aware that this knife has limitations, but still is a pretty good knife for that price. And if you're not looking for a multi-tool or so, and you just want a blade, you know, for your everyday purposes, just in case you need to cut a piece of cordage, cut a piece of string, cut a piece of wire, and all these kind of things. You know, maybe if you're a hiker and you just need a knife to process food, to chop up a couple of potatoes, for example. Or if you're just kind of like the tactical person that wants a little bit of self-defense character in a knife, which this one certainly has because of that point. This is a good knife, and it's very well manufactured for its price. So I would leave it like so. And yeah, if you like that video, as usual, give me a thumbs up. Make sure you leave a comment if you got something to add, if you got experiences with this knife maybe. And otherwise, up until then, see you next time, and have a great time outdoors, and especially with your knife, right? See ya. Bye bye.